Military surplus ammo. Think about this for a second. You are holding a piece of history that a superpower's taxpayers spent billions of dollars to perfect. Yet you bought it for the price of a cheap lunch. That is the soul of military surplus, or milsurp. These rounds represent the massive overruns of Cold War government contracts, where factories operated 247 to prepare for global conflicts that, fortunately, never began. When the United States military shifted its primary infantry standard from the heavy 7.62x 51mm NATO to the high-velocity 5.56x 45mm, mountain-sized stockpiles of ammunition were suddenly released into the American civilian market. This isn't just cheap ammo. It's battle-ready technology. A single wooden crate might contain rounds manufactured in 1972, specifically for the United States Army M16 during the Vietnam era. Here is the kicker. These rounds often exceed the quality of modern value-pack commercial loads because they were built to uncompromising mil-spec standards. In a combat zone, a failure to cycle isn't a minor annoyance at the range, it is a fatal catastrophe. By shooting milsurp, you are utilizing high-grade, precision-engineered hardware that has been subsidized by the most expensive research and development budget on the planet. Spam cans. Nothing says Cold War relic quite like the spam can. These aren't just metal boxes. They are industrial-grade time capsules engineered from heavy-gauge galvanized steel. Military logisticians had one job: ensure this ammunition survived a century in the worst conditions imaginable. From Siberian swamps to blistering desert depots, by utilizing a lead solder seal to create a 100% airtight environment. They ensured the internal chemistry remained bone dry for over 50 years. The ritual is iconic. You take that oversized, sardine-style key and begin to peel back the lid. Suddenly, a sharp hiss of pressurized air from the mid-20th century escapes, followed by the pungent, metallic scent of 1960s industrial chemistry. Inside, rows of pristine 7.62x 39mm or 440 round tins of 7.62x 54mm sit waiting, looking as if they left the factory yesterday morning. This level of extreme preservation is why these cans remain vastly more reliable than modern cardboard boxed ammo that has been sitting in a damp American garage for just a few months. It is the ultimate survivalist insurance policy. Corrosive primers. The most significant caveat when navigating the world of vintage surplus is the hidden chemical legacy known as the corrosive primer. Throughout the majority of the 20th century, military arsenals relied on potassium chlorate in their priming compounds due to its legendary shelf life and its ability to ignite with absolute certainty in sub-zero combat conditions. It was a choice born of necessity. Reliability in the mud and snow was more important than long-term maintenance. However, for the modern owner of a vintage rifle, this compound presents a formidable challenge. The moment the firing pin strikes, this chemical mixture transforms into a microscopic layer of salt that coats every surface from your barrels to the gas tube and bolt face. These salts act like a high-powered magnet for atmospheric moisture, which is a disaster waiting to happen. If you live in a humid environment, your prized rifle's bore can transition from mirror bright to a pitted, orange landscape of rust in less than 24 hours. It is a fascinating, high-stakes trade-off. You receive a round that will ignite perfectly after 70 years in a crate, but it requires you to treat your firearm with the same immediate, disciplined care a professional soldier would provide in a combat zone. Berdan primers. While American shooters are accustomed to the reloadable nature of domestic brass, much of the world's military surplus utilizes the Berdan ignition system. Invented by an American general but adopted primarily by European and Russian arsenals, this design features 2 or more small flash holes, usually 0.02 inches in diameter, and a permanent anvil built directly into the floor of the case. While this setup is arguably more robust for long-term storage and harsh military cycling, it creates a significant barrier for the modern hobbyist, because the anvil is an integral part of the shell casing rather than the primer cup. Conventional reloading dies will snap their decapping pins instantly if they encounter a Berdan case. This technical divergence turns millions of high-quality brass casings into single-use scrap metal once the trigger is pulled. In the era of the Cold War, this was a logical choice for mass production, where the recovery and reloading of brass on a chaotic battlefield was never a priority. It favors absolute ignition reliability across temperatures ranging from 40 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit over the convenience of a second life for the shell, making it a one-and-done solution for the infantryman. Steel-cased. If you've ever wondered why you can pick up a crate of 500 rounds for a fraction of the cost of premium ammo, the answer lies in the cold-rolled steel hulls of the Eastern Bloc. During the height of Soviet military expansion, copper was a precious strategic resource reserved for high-priority electronics and aircraft components, forcing engineers to look toward more abundant materials for infantry calibers, like the 7.62x39mm, to keep these steel cases from turning into a pile of rust in some damp underground bunker. They are typically sealed with a thin layer of lacquer or a modern gray polymer. The real-world trade-off is often debated at gun store counters, but the math is simple. The money you save on just 2 cases of this surplus is usually enough to buy a brand new replacement barrel and bolt assembly for your rifle. While it is true that steel doesn't have the same elasticity as brass, meaning it doesn't expand to seal the chamber as perfectly at 50,000 psi, it remains the indispensable lifeblood of high-volume shooters. For the enthusiast who values trigger time over shiny casings, steel-cased surplus is the ultimate economic engine that keeps the range days affordable. Non-corrosive primers. The great technological pivot in the world of surplus ammunition occurred when military arsenals finally moved away from the destructive, salt-based ignition compounds of the early 20th century. These modern lots utilize what we call non-corrosive primers, which replaced the volatile potassium salts with lead styphnate to create a reliable spark without the side effect of ruined steel. For most NATO countries, this transition was a primary focus by the early 1960s, though you will still find many Eastern Bloc factories churning out corrosive variants well into the 1980s to exhaust their chemical stockpiles. Finding a clean lot like this is often considered the holy grail for surplus collectors, because it offers the perfect marriage of vintage pricing and modern convenience. You can fire a 100-round string of fire and head straight home without that frantic, post-range ritual of dousing your rifle in hot soapy water or ammonia. This advancement essentially removed the final barrier to the surplus market, allowing owners of expensive, precision-machined modern rifles to enjoy the history of Cold War-era stocks without gambling the integrity of their bores. Boxer primers. If the Berdan system is a fortress of military tradition, the Boxer primer is the open door to the American spirit of self-reliance and reloading. Standardized by the United States and NATO, the Boxer design utilizes a single, large flash hole located at the dead center of the case's primer pocket. Unlike its European counterpart, the Boxer primer cup contains its own internal anvil, meaning the case floor is perfectly flat and unobstructed. This simple geometric difference is what allows a hobbyist with a simple $30 hand tool to pop out a spent primer and prepare the brass for a second life. This design choice is the secret reason why American surplus, such as late-era 3006 Springfield or 5.56x45mm NATO, often commands a much higher resale price than its Eastern competitors. It isn't just about the initial shot. It's about the inherent value of the high-quality brass casing that can be reused up to 10 times or more. For the long-range enthusiast or the budget-conscious prepper, finding a crate of Boxer-primed surplus is like finding a pile of raw material that keeps the cost per shot plummeting with every reload. Brass-cased. In the hierarchy of surplus materials, brass remains the undisputed gold standard for reliability and longevity. Unlike the rigid nature of steel, brass is a relatively soft alloy of copper and zinc, possessing a unique metallurgical property known as malleability. When a round of 5.56x45mm NATO is ignited, the casing momentarily expands to form a gas-tight seal against the chamber walls at pressures exceeding 60 psi. This ensures that all the propellant energy is directed forward, maximizing the velocity of the projectile while preventing dirty gases from leaking back into your rifle's delicate action. This superior sealing capability is the reason why shooters using brass-cased surplus often report significantly cleaner firearms and fewer mechanical malfunctions after a full day of training. Beyond performance, there is a substantial secondary market for this material, even if you don't reload. High-quality spent brass can be sold to recyclers or reloaders for roughly $0, $10 to $0, $15 per case. This effectively rebates a portion of your initial investment, making that premium-looking crate of NATO surplus a much more strategic financial choice than it appears on the surface. Full Metal Jacket FMJ. If you open any generic crate of surplus, the projectile you will almost certainly find is the Full Metal Jacket, or FMJ. This design, consisting of a soft lead core swaddled in a harder copper nickel skin, became the global military standard following the Hague Convention of 1899. The international community sought to prohibit expanding bullets in warfare, leading to the adoption of a projectile that stays intact upon impact. For the modern shooter, this history provides a bullet that feeds flawlessly into the chamber thanks to its smooth, aerodynamic profile and 0% chance of snagging on the feed ramps of a semi-automatic rifle. Because these are produced by the billions, FMJ surplus allows for a high volume of trigger time that would otherwise be cost-prohibitive with specialty hunting rounds. The consistency of a military-grade FMJ, often weighted at a standard 55 grains or 62 grains for small-bore rifles, means you can expect repeatable accuracy out to 300 yards without breaking your budget. It is the ultimate utility player in the world of firearms, predictable, durable, and engineered for the harsh reality of infantry combat, where reliability is the only metric that matters. Armor-piercing AP. Few things stir the curiosity of a firearms enthusiast like a box of surplus marked with AP for armor-piercing. These rounds are engineered for a singular, violent purpose, defeating hard targets like light-armored vehicles and steel barriers that would easily stop a standard lead-core bullet. Inside the copper jacket, you won't find just lead, but a penetrator core made of hardened steel or even tungsten, which is 7 times denser than lead. When the bullet strikes a target at 800 feet per second, the jacket peels away like a fruit skin, allowing the needle-sharp penetrator to punch through the surface with surgical precision. You can often identify these by their distinctive paint codes, such as the black tips on old 30-06 Springfield rounds or the legendary green tip M855 used by the United States Army. While the M855 is technically barrier-blind rather than true armor-piercing, its 7-grain steel insert provides a level of penetration that can easily punch through a quarter-inch of structural steel at a distance of 100 yards. Because of this destructive potential, these rounds are highly sought after by collectors, but are subject to strict legal scrutiny. Always verify your local regulations, as the mere possession of certain AP calibers can carry heavy legal weight in specific jurisdictions. Tracer ammo. If you have ever seen a nighttime military demonstration that looked like a scene from a science fiction movie, you were witnessing tracer ammo in action. These rounds are engineered with a hollow base filled with a pyrotechnic chemical compound, typically a mixture of magnesium and strontium salts. When the powder ignites, it lights this candle at the back of the projectile, which then burns brightly for about 2 to 3 seconds as it streaks downrange. For a machine gunner or a squad leader, this provides an immediate visual feedback loop to adjust fire onto a target without needing to use sights in low-light conditions. The catch with these visually stunning rounds is that they are essentially flying flares, burning at temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes them a severe fire hazard at many dry-weather outdoor ranges. In the surplus market, you can identify them by their color-coded tips, usually painted red, orange, or sometimes violet depending on the country of origin. While a 145-grain tracer round for a 7.62x51mm NATO rifle is a thrilling addition to any collection, most shooters reserve them for specialized night shoot events where the risk of brush fires is carefully managed and the spectacular light show can be fully appreciated. Police Leo Trade-In. As we close our list, we stumble upon the best-kept secret of the secondary market. Law enforcement officer Leo Trade-In ammunition. Unlike military surplus that might have been sitting in a humid bunker since the Korean War, Leo Trade-Ins are usually modern, high shelf-life rounds sourced directly from domestic police departments. Most agencies have strict liability policies that require them to cycle out their duty ammunition every 12 to 24 months, regardless of whether it was ever fired. This results in a massive influx of premium, nickel-plated duty rounds like the 124-grain 9mm jacketed hollow point JHP hitting the civilian market at nearly half of their original retail price. because these rounds were intended for life-or-death self-defense situations rather than mass infantry suppressive fire. They are manufactured to some of the highest quality control standards in the entire ballistics industry. You are getting specialized, high-expansion projectiles from world-class brands that usually cost over $1.00 per round, but at a surplus price point. It is the ultimate insider move for the practical shooter. You aren't just buying old lead. You are acquiring modern, state-of-the-art defensive technology that was trusted to protect those who serve and protect.